Thanks for joining us today. Welcome and happy Friday to you. My name is Liz. I'm with Career China, and joining me today is a colleague of mine, Josh Wilson, also from Career China. Say hey, Josh.
Hello.
Hey,
It's
nice
good
to
to be
have you
on.
with us today.
Yes.
So today's topic, we're going to talk together about one of the common questions that we get asked here at Career China, especially when people are new and they're trying to figure out what kind of jobs to apply for. They want to know what it's like teaching kids versus adults in China. And the reason I have Josh on today is because the two of us together, we have a lot of different experience from teaching kids, teenagers, adults, and even business classes to adults. So kind of a wide range. So we can do a lot of comparing and contrasting, sort of talk about, some of the things to consider and give you some advice if you're still trying to decide what's best for you. Okay, but first, if you're not familiar with Career China, just to give you a quick overview for those of you who are new, we're a global firm and we match companies in China with overseas candidates. So we have a Chinese team based in Beijing, and they work with a number of schools and major companies throughout China who are looking for international talent to join their team. We have a variety of jobs in China, but one of the biggest demands is for international teachers. So we also have an international team that works with all of our candidates who are applying to help try to match them with the right jobs based on their skills and all that good stuff. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. And Josh and I are on the international team, so we talk a lot with the candidates and help match them up with jobs. So that's why we're here today. And just a reminder, if at any time you have a question during this broadcast, feel free to input it in the comments below, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as we go along. But if you are watching this broadcast later, you can still ask questions or comments, and we'll be sure to follow up and answer those for you. Right? So, adults versus kids. Question that we get. So one of the first decisions that people need to make when they're applying for a job in China is trying to decide what type of school they want to teach at and who they want to teach. We're going to do a separate show talking about all the different types of places you can teach English or work in China, from private schools, international schools, language institutes, all that good stuff. But today we're just going to focus on the topic of the kids versus the adults. So Josh, can you tell us a little bit about where you taught and who you taught?
I taught kids in Guangzhou, China. And I taught for a language institute called First Leap. So it was an after-school language program where parents would pay the kids to go to school. And so I taught there for over a year, and I absolutely loved it. Loved my staff, loved the kids, and and then I also taught adults as well. So I was able to teach business English as well. So I kind of got that experience. Pretty much a wide range from business English all the way to teaching 3-year-olds basic colors and shapes and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so Josh taught at First Leap. He taught kids primarily, but then he also taught adults. That's cool. I did not teach kids at all, I'll be honest. I actually taught at Metten, which is also a language institute in China. And I went there because I primarily wanted to teach adults. Just me personally, that was my preference. When I got there, I discovered that at Metten, they actually teach teenagers as well. So we had some classes that had a lot of teenagers, like 14, kind of years old, in that range. But we did have a few students who were even like 10 or 12. So they were actually fairly young. But they were in our program because their English was actually pretty advanced. They've been learning it all their lives, really. So I was able to teach, basically from like the young teens all the way up through adults, and then also I taught business English to adults because Metten had a program where they got contracts with different companies around China, like hospitals, manufacturing plants, logistics companies, things like that, who did international business. And so I also got to teach a lot of those international classes too, or excuse me, those business classes to those international business people. So again, a very wide range. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. So I guess my next question to you, Josh, is like, why did you choose to teach kids?
I get that question a lot, actually, because growing up, I played sports, and I was really into coaching and motivation and inspiring and kids. I used to go do after like Boys and Girls Club and stuff like that. And it's something that I wanted to pursue out of high school and into college. But my life took me into a different direction and was starting to do more marketing and business and hospitality. And so I always wondered if I would ever be good at it. To be honest with you, it was just something that was always lingering, and I always wanted to figure out a way to either teach kids or coach or anything like that. And, when we made the decision to move to China, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to go teach kids. I wanted to see if I would be good at it. Because I love kids. I love being around kids, and they seem to love me and hang off of me and stuff like that. So that was really kind of my motivation, is I wanted to see if I would be good at it. I guess it was one of those things that I didn't want to live with regret. So I didn't want to be 40, 50, 60 years old wondering if I would have been a good teacher. So there's no better time than the present. So we went to China, and I was able to fulfill a dream, really. And now I know that I love teaching. I love doing, interacting with kids and things like that. And I can say that I felt like I was good at it. So now I don't have to wonder anymore. So that was kind of my motivation, and wanting to teach kids and, help inspire another generation, to do better things. So it was a great experience overall.
Cool. Yeah, we hear that a lot from some of our teachers, that they love kids, or they always wanted to be a teacher. And let's face it, the pictures of the cute kids, they definitely get a lot of people, and they think, oh, that looks like so much fun. I mean, for me personally, a lot of people wonder why I didn't want to teach kids. And I guess, again, it comes down to personal preference. I mean, I've had a lot of jobs in the past in hospitality or tourism where I dealt a lot with kids. But just for me, there was something about teaching the older levels, the adults. Personally, I felt like I could relate to them more. Like real life sort of situations. And I don't know, I guess I really wanted to connect with the culture a lot too. And I felt like with kids, they're so small, and they're very kid-like. You can maybe learn some stuff about the culture, but I just felt like maybe with the adults and the older students, that I could have more of a closer connection, and maybe actually have conversations with them, especially the ones that were at the higher levels. At Metin, how it works, and it's actually at a lot of language institutes in China, they have Chinese teachers that teach like the very low level basics, like the phonics and stuff. So like levels 0 or 1, where people are just trying to learn the basics of it. The Chinese teachers do a lot of that. So it makes it so that when the international teachers start teaching them, they're actually at a little bit higher level, and they can communicate even just a little bit. So I would start teaching at level 2 at Metin, and the students could communicate with me. And it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun and laughs and jokes and activities and stuff in the classes. And it was just really nice. I just felt like I could relate to them more. And even the ones that got higher up into levels 4, 5, 6, and the business classes, it was really great. Now, I will say it can be more challenging to teach at those higher levels. You definitely need to know how to teach English properly.
You need to know English, yeah, very well.
Yeah, not like, and if someone asks you a question, and we sort of talked about this in the TEFL video last week. What's great about the TEFL is when you take a good TEFL course, it reminds you of all those concepts that you might have forgotten if you're a native English speaker. Like things like the tenses. If you asked me at first, my first thought, how many tenses are there in the English language? A person might say 3. But you're reminded in the TEFL course that there's actually 12. And you need to be able to explain to your students those 12 different tenses, at least at the higher levels. So I found that teaching adults was awesome and I loved it. But it was a little bit challenging for me because I had to practice my English skills even more, and I had to do more research and studying to make sure that I was explaining these topics accurately to them, because it was really important to them, especially ones that were going to go to school overseas for university, or they were getting a job, international job. Like, you need to be able to teach them properly.
Yeah, and it's similar to First Leap, how you were mentioning earlier how the Chinese teachers teach the basics and the phonics and everything like that. First Leap's very similar. And as an international teacher, we come in and teach the fun topics. So kind of similar to the adults like you were teaching. We would teach science and logical thinking, critical thinking, and world, geography. And so we were like the fun people, So when we were come in, that our students knew that they were about to have fun, but also learn at the same time too.
Yeah.
So it was it's kind of similar, like to teaching the adults, and you would bring joy to the kids,
Mm-hmm.
faces when you would come in and things like that. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, and for me also, it was a little bit of my background too. I know that a lot of teachers that come over, they go to school for teaching, and they want to teach kids. So teaching kids is perfect for them in China. Because that's something they want to do. Me personally, I worked more on the business side in the States before I came to China. So actually, one of the number one things I wanted to do was teach business English, just because there was a lot of crossover with like my background and stuff. So I thought it would be really fun. And I wanted to do like more international business stuff and get some experience in China doing international sort of business. So even though I was teaching my business students, I was actually learning a lot about how business is done in China. So even though I was an English teacher, I was learning a lot about Chinese business culture. And so I was able to like relate that, back to my former colleagues in the States. So I actually learned a lot through it. And it was almost like, I was doing business internationally myself, even though I was just a teacher. So it was a really cool experience for someone who, I think for someone who wants that type of experience, internationally for business or whatnot, I think teaching is actually a really good opportunity for that, especially in China, because there are a lot of adults learning English in China too.
Yeah, and even for teaching kids, like I became such good friends with my Chinese teachers. That was one way that I was able to kind of dive into the culture. Those were my best friends when I was living in China.
Your colleagues at the school?
Yeah, my colleagues, my Chinese teachers, my managers, they always wanted to hang out with me and everything, and I wanted to hang out with them just as much, So I was able to learn the culture that way as well. So yeah, so it's kind of for both. Yeah.
That's good. Well, okay, let's kind of jump into the next topic. It's sort of, we started to kind of go there.
Yeah.
What did you like about teaching kids specifically?
Um, there's a lot. There's so many different aspects that I enjoy teaching. Teaching kids. I think you make such a connection with your kids because you are teaching them, once or twice a week, so they see you a lot. So you kind of, I don't know. I think I miss the most about seeing their lighting up their faces, walking into the classroom, knowing that they're about to get a lesson from me. That brought joy to me. That made my day better, regardless of if I was having a good day or not. Also, the working schedule I was a big fan of as well. And wanting to teach kids, I found like teaching adults, the schedule was kind of broader. It was kind of a bigger schedule. So, but yeah, there's a lot. It was just fun. Every day was different, and really the kids made my time, just amazing when I was there in China. What about you?
What kind of topics did you teach?
I taught science, music, world culture, which was really fun. So we would teach, lessons about China, about the Chinese New Year. So these kids are still, learning their own culture, and I get to kind of help them, which helps me learn the culture as well. So that was a lot of fun. It was really cool to kind of dive into that. And then art, that was always fun too. With my 3 to 5 year olds, like doing art lessons was just so much fun and just so cute. And it was really cool that you could see the progression that you helped make. And
Yeah.
these kids are also trying to go to universities outside, or they're trying to help their families too, eventually in the long run. And so you're kind of having a piece of that, to kind of help them progress into global citizens. So it was really cool to see the progression as well.
Cool. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. What did you like about teaching adults?
Uh, there's so many things. I think I was really surprised at how much I really enjoyed teaching them. So much. When I came over to China, I knew that I would like teaching. I had done like training in the past and stuff like that, but I had never been like an actual teacher. But I always found it rewarding, which is why I thought I would be a good teacher and I thought I'd like it. But I think I was really surprised. The adult students I had, they were so much fun because the curiosity. I mean, I think that's what really took me aback at first was that because, like I said, by the time they got to me at this particular school I was teaching at, they could already communicate to a certain level. And they just always wanted to ask me questions about everything. They wanted to know everything about me, why I came to China, what I used to do before. And then I got to ask them about, their lives. And we spent so much of our class times actually talking to each other and having like a real cultural exchange. It was so much fun. And I loved their curiosity and I loved their enthusiasm for learning and just their optimism for their futures. Like they were all so positive and they all really believed that learning English was going to be so great for their futures and stuff. And so I really appreciated that. But and also the business aspect. I mentioned before, I felt like I learned so much about Chinese business culture that it was really great for me and my background that way. But I think one of the biggest surprises I had was actually teaching the teenagers in China.
Yeah.
Like I said, when I first came to China, I knew I wanted to teach adults. And when I got the job at Metin and I learned a little bit about them, I realized that they actually taught teenagers as well as adults. And I was a little bit hesitant when they first said that because just coming from the States, I do have friends who are teachers in like middle school and high school. And just the stories they would tell me, I just thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to teach teenagers. Like, really? There's going to be hormonal kids, in the class being all crazy and, crushes and disruptions and stuff. That was not the case. I was so blown away by the teenagers in China. Now, again, it's because I was at a language institute. So I'm sure it's probably different if you're teaching at a high school, or a public school in China. You're going to have bigger classes. Maybe some of the kids don't want to be there. They're rowdy. They're there every day. You could probably still have some of that dynamic. But by and large, I was really impressed. And, because these students, their parents were paying money to go there, and a lot of them were aspiring to go to school overseas in the future, they took their schoolwork and learning English very seriously. So I hardly had any disruptions, never any class issues. And honestly, they made me laugh so hard every day because they were so curious. And while the adults were curious about like life things, the adults wanted to know about my love life.
Yeah.
They're obsessed
I would get that question a lot as well. How did you propose to your wife and things like that? So
they wanted to know everything about that, and they wanted to know your family. The adults wanted to know things like, how does it work? How does like healthcare work in the States? We would kind of compare and contrast. They would want to know like about jobs and banking and buying a house and all that like life stuff. But the teenagers, they just wanted to talk about Taylor Swift and like pop culture. And they would always like ask questions about different types of pop culture stuff. And I had some who they would watch American TV shows, and so they
Yep.
love to talk about American
Like
TV.
How I Met Your Mother. We used to quote that in my classes sometimes
I
too.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, and Friends. They watched Friends, and there was a number of other like younger sort of shows too, and musicians, like I said, Taylor Swift and some of them. They were obsessed with them, and they just wanted to talk about pop culture stuff. So it was really fun. I really loved teaching the teenagers. I just loved it. And another thing I sort of got out of this teenagers too, which is something I didn't expect, was in some ways I almost felt like a guidance counselor for them,
Yeah.
because China is such a traditional culture still. There were curiosities and questions that the teenagers had that maybe they didn't feel comfortable asking their parents, who are very traditional, or maybe they were embarrassed to ask their parents. And at their schools, at Chinese schools, they don't have a lot of resources for that. So a lot of times I would find that young boys or young girls would come and confide in me about like problems they were having at school. I had some, of course, girls asking me about like boys and boyfriends and stuff like that. But I also had some teenage boys who would come to me like because they were having problems with their teacher at their high school, and they would come to me and like ask me questions about like lessons and stuff like that. So I found like I was acting like a guidance counselor for some of them. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
How about your Chinese teachers? You said that you had a really close relationship with them. Can you explain a little bit more about like what you enjoyed about working with them, or just
Yeah. Well, it's similar to how you were dealing with your students. I mean, my Chinese teachers were always wanting to learn and always wanting to know about American culture as well. So in the office when we're preparing for our lessons for the day, we would have time to be able to talk and interact with each other. And I would get the same questions that I would get from my adult students that wanted to know about love and wanted to know about, what TV show should I be watching right now? And, culture as well. You know, a lot of my Chinese teachers were around my age, in their early 20s, late 20s, so they're right. They're still at the curious age as well. So, but we talked about everything. We talked about, Chinese relationships, how relationships work in China versus, how relationships work in America, and, things like that. And, I learned a lot from them, and I feel like they learned a lot from me as well. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I'm still close with them. I still talk to them, my Chinese teachers, so I still stay in touch with them. And, if they ever have any questions or anything, they would always ask questions about, proper English, how to say things, how to teach their class, things like that. So we had a pretty close bond with all my Chinese teachers, and they would help me with my Chinese daily living if I needed help with apartment or something like that, or paying how to pay bills. If I get a slip that's in Chinese, I would take it to my Chinese teachers, and they would help, and they would call. And I mean, it was overall they took good care of me, and I just looked at them like they were just great friends, great people. So it was a cool experience overall. But yeah.
I have to say, I think I had a similar experience with my coworkers too, and I think that that's something that's interesting because even if you're going, like even though I taught teenagers and adults, I also got the chance to get to know my Chinese colleagues as well, who are other teachers. And you're right, a lot of times they'll ask you questions like, is this correct English, or and then we'd also learn a lot about the cultures and stuff too. But it sounds like from your perspective, even though you taught kids primarily, you still had that chance to interact with the adults and the older people too.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like
And even parents, because their parents, some of my students' parents were fluent in English, and they were, wanting their kid to grow up, with English skills as well. So I was able to interact with the parents, and they would invite me to go to strawberry fields to go pick strawberries with, their kids' friends and everything like that. And, so I built a relationship with some of the parents too, that were able to communicate back and forth. And even the parents that couldn't communicate, sometimes their kid knew more English than them, but they would still attempt, and they still wanted to have that connection with their English teacher, their kid's English teacher.
Wow.
So that was always a cool experience as well. And they would invite us out to dinner, and we'd go have dinner and traditional, they really wanted to show their culture to us. And that was really cool experience, to traditional tea, to let's go have a tea and literally go sit for 5 hours and do the whole tea ceremony and play, Chinese board games and stuff, So I was able to kind of dive into the culture, even though I was teaching kids and I couldn't have full conversation with my kids. But my older kids, the 12, 13-year-olds, I was able to have full conversation, how was school today? And, what's your favorite lesson from today? And things like that. We would talk about movies. We would talk about new games and new animations and stuff that they were into. And so I was able to connect with them and just have conversation with them that way. So, I was still able to have conversation, but not as deep as conversations I was able to have with my adult learners, my adult business classes and stuff that I taught as well. So I was still able to dive into it.
Well, that kind of gets me to the next question, because again, we started going there, is sort of what are the differences that we've seen since we both have experience teaching different age groups, you teaching kids and adults and myself teaching like teenagers all the way up to adults. What are some of the biggest differences that you've noticed?
Well, the biggest difference is being able to fully communicate. With my adult learners, I was able to have full conversations. Sometimes I would have a music lesson, and I would just print up a song and we would talk about the song. And sometimes that took us to a different subject about, how Social Security works in America, just things like that. We start on one subject and end with another one. And it was so enlightening, but also with teaching the kids, I felt it was more fun. It was more, I could be kind of a goofball and, kind of step outside of my shell a little bit when I was going to teach my kids. And I try to be creative with the lessons. And really it's about having fun and learning at the same time, to where teaching adults was really teaching and really focusing on, their English, because everyone was different. One of my adult learners, he was learning English, practically, he was great at English, but he wanted to, really get it because he was going to America and doing speeches and, being in front of people in different countries and speaking English. So, to that realm, all the way down to, teaching 3-year-olds about colors and things like that. So there's a big difference, but, I think it based down to your personality and what, what excites you and what, you're kind of looking for when going over there. But
I feel like I have to agree. I feel like even though I didn't teach the little kids, I feel like even teaching the teenagers, it was more, I guess you could say, just fun in the general sense that you would think of fun. Like the older levels, for the adults, and of course the business adults, it was much more serious. Of course, I would try to always bring some fun into my classes anyway, because that's just who I am, and I always wanted to make learning English fun for them. So I did my best to make all the lessons as interesting and fun as possible. But for the most part, they were very serious lessons for business. And it was the same thing with a lot of the adult lessons too. They were more serious. But I found that when I had the classes with the teenagers, I could be a lot more goofy and silly and a
little looser. Yeah,
definitely a little looser, I think. And even if we were teaching the same topic, because how it worked at the school I was teaching at is we taught them the same content. There was just a different audience. So I could teach the same lesson to the adults and have it be much more kind of serious. And then I could turn around and teach it to the teenagers and have it turn out completely differently. I could have, there was one lesson in particular, we had to teach them how to there's a couple of them on negotiation and chairing a meeting and, having meetings and stuff like that. And when I teach the adults, it would be very serious. But when I teach the kids or the teenagers, excuse me, we would make it very fun. One time I made all these printouts of different candy and stuff, and then they had to go around and negotiate with each other, and just because the teenagers, they want to have fun. So of course the adults took it all seriously, and the kids were just having fun with it, and they were really like negotiating with each other and like coming up with all these reasons why they should trade the candy and this and that. So I just found that the teenagers brought a lot more fun to the classroom, and it was a lot more like jovial and like joking around and stuff, even though I was teaching the exact same lesson sometimes. So yeah, I think that was definitely, and like we said before, just in general, the adult topics tend to be more serious, like the questions they would ask. Yeah.
Well, that was a big difference for me. Is I thought teaching adults was definitely a little bit more difficult. Of course, it depends on the institute and depends on, you know, the curriculum and everything and how they have it set up. I know at First Leap, we were given lesson plans, and we were basically, you know, we had to figure out how we wanted to present it. So each class was different, kind of similar, you know, teaching adults and teenagers. Each class was different, so I knew how to prepare my class and everything like that. But overall, with First Leap, and they have the ongoing training and everything to kind of, you know, make you a better teacher overall. It was a little bit easier because once you had the lesson plan and you knew what materials you needed, you know, a couple months into it, you know, you were kind of already, you knew exactly it, you know, you didn't have to spend so much time preparing or anything like that. But whereas teaching English to adults, it felt like even if I taught the same subject 3 times, I still need to put a little bit more into it because you never knew if it was going to be a big class. You know, depending on this institute I was teaching at, I could have 20 people show up, or I could have one person show up. Well, I needed to prepare that lesson every time for 20 people and one person, you know, so it just depended on that. But so I felt like I put a little bit more, you know, planning and everything like that, and talking with my friends that were living in China compared to the, you know, workload and everything that I had at my institute compared to the all the different adult institutes and the different kid institutes, that I was having more fun. That makes
Yeah, you know, I have to say, I talked with a lot of people when I was in China too. I had a lot of friends that taught kids, because there's a huge market for kids teachers. Because
it's a growing market.
I mean, even though there are so many adults learning English in China for business and then also just for themselves, you have to think about the fact that the kids, they're learning English now. They have baby classes. So all the way from babies all the way through teenagers. They're taking it at private school, international school, and then they're also like taking it at language institutes. So there's a lot more kids teaching jobs available just in general. It seems like there's so many different institutes. So I had a lot of friends that taught kids, and I have to say they loved it. Most all of them really had a great time, and what they talked about most was just how fun it was. They had so much fun with the kids. And I had some other friends who taught adults like I did at some of the other big schools like EF and Wall Street English and some of the other big institutes. And while those classes can certainly be fun, and the teachers do their best to make them fun, the subjects are just so much more serious, and the students are more serious, and just overall.
And the level of English that you need to know to teach those higher level English classes to adults is it's not easy.
Yeah. Oh, I want to say.
But it is a lot more fun. I felt like teaching kids. I mean, if you would have asked me years ago, Josh, would you dress up as a brown bear and go and you know, sing to kids and things like that? I've probably been like, no way. But while living in China, that opportunity came across, and where me and my Chinese teachers were all dressed as different animals, and I had a blast. You know, it was just more, I don't know, it was more fun. I felt like, you know, to teach the kids.
You know, that actually gets me to the next question. That's kind of a perfect segue. Which is right for you? Because there are distinct differences between teaching adults and teaching kids. Now, another element to that is the type of institute you teach at. And we'll do another session on this maybe in a couple weeks where we talk about all the different kinds of schools that you can teach at in China, from public schools, private schools, international schools, high schools, whatnot, and then language institutes. Now, both you and I, we taught at language institutes. So what these are is these are places where people are paying money to learn English on their own. So they happen like after school hours, like nights and weekends. So that's going to be a factor as far as like the hours, the pay, the types of students you have, the types of resources you have at your disposal. But if we just focus specifically on the kids versus adults, I think it's really important that people understand what their personality is, their own, like teachers, that they know like what your personality is, what like your interests are, and who you would be good at teaching. Mm-hmm. So can you tell me a little bit what you think works best for teaching kids? Like, who should teach kids?
I think that's a good question. Someone that should teach kids is someone that likes to have fun and is a little adventurous, because teaching kids can be adventurous. You can have some quiet days, but then you can have some not so quiet days. But yeah, I think it does boil down to personality. But a good thing that I really appreciated about First Leap was the ongoing training that they have. So I know during my training session, there was a lot of new people that have never taught kids, never hung out with kids, never anything, but they just wanted the adventure of living in China and traveling in China and teaching in China and making money and all that good stuff. But with the training, they were able to kind of like break out of their shell and realize like, oh, this is fun. So I think it's, it's that personality to want to do something different, but also the openness, like being open to, like I never would have thought that I would have done any type of singing or dancing or anything like that, but I did, and I had fun doing it, and I would do it again. So but it does boil down to just kind of being open to it, and that's with going to China in general, I think too.
I think you hit it when you talked about the personality. Because the thing is and we talked a little bit about how the kids' classes are more fun and interactive. I think it's really important that someone who wants to come and teach kids in China, they are willing to do all of that stuff. So a lot of the English classes have songs, and you're going to be singing. So I just put that out there. If you want to teach kids in China, you will be singing.
Well, a lot of the curriculum is based on that, like based on like song and remembering and learning that way. So that's a big part of the curriculum for teaching kids.
So you're going to be singing, you might be dancing, dressing up in silly costumes, doing, like you said, what, you dressed up as a bear or something?
Yeah. And Santa. But yeah, and I was able to do brown bear, do a whole like theater type of activity and event. And it was a lot of fun, and I never would have thought I would have done that and would have gone on stage. But being able, with the training and everything, kind of getting out of my shell of being nervous, at the start, to where I was at, towards the end of when I was getting done teaching, like I would have done anything, because it was old. It was, oops, sorry about that. it was this, saved. So, but yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So for kids, definitely someone who's very open, maybe not shy or not afraid to make a fool of themselves a little bit. That they're very, very willing to sing, dance, dress in costumes, and get down on the floor with the level of the kids too. Like you need to be comfortable with getting down and like interacting with the kids and all that stuff. And animation, kind of like your smile, your face, your hands, like being animated and lively is so important when you're teaching kids, especially at the younger ages, because they only know a few words. Like you were saying, you taught like circle and square and stuff like that.
And that's stuff that you learn in training, because I didn't know what it's called, TPR, total physical response. So, how you kind of like a charades, a little bit of teaching, but all that's done in training. So like if you don't know it going into it, that's fine too. I didn't know it going into it.
Well, at least at your school, and that's kind of the difference some of the schools is, some schools, and I know from experience at First Leap also, they're actually a really big school in China. We hire for a lot of teachers at First Leap, and you taught there. So we actually have a number of people on our team that used to work at First Leap, and they provide tons of training for their teachers. I mean, their teachers, if they've never taught kids before or anything like that, like they're going to get so much training. They're going to become a great teacher, if they take it seriously and they really want to do it. Not all schools are like that. So that's definitely, some questions to ask and, try to get to know that school and find out what resources they have. But sort of back to the decision of if you should teach kids or not. If you're not a person that likes to sing, if you don't like to dance or kind of be silly or goofy or get down on the floor with kids, then maybe teaching kids isn't right for you. If you like to just be more, to the book, more serious teaching, like just strict teaching topics, then maybe teaching older students or maybe teaching adults is better for you. If you have a business background, then definitely, try to see what you can do about teaching business English or teaching some business professionals too. So again, it kind of comes down to your personality. I think that someone who is a little bit more shy and likes to take things more seriously, like by the book, would be really great to teach a lot of the adult classes because they tend to do things a lot more seriously. But if you're willing to just have fun and play and all that good stuff, teaching kids is great too. But it also depends on the institute and, all of that and the environment. That always has a big factor. But those are the two main things that I tell people, like if they're trying to decide if they want to teach kids or adults. Also, I guess it comes down to what you enjoy also. For me, I felt like I didn't really want to spend my day talking about circles and squares. I'd rather spend my day talking about real life issues, grocery shopping, camping, cooking, like things that are more like daily life stuff, because those were a lot of the classes that I had for the adults. We would talk about like, you're going on a trip, pack for your trip. What are you going to take? I had a whole big lesson I did where we went to a supermarket, and I took the whole school and I made the supermarket different departments of the grocery store. And they were all planning a party, and they had to write out their menus, and they had to decide what they were making. And then they had to go to the supermarket, and they had to find all of their items. And they also had a budget of a certain amount of money. And so then they had to go through and they had to find and buy all their stuff, and they had to figure out how much money they spent. And then they had to give a report back to the class about their party, what they were making for the party, why, where did they find the ingredients at the supermarket, and how much money did they spend. So I kind of liked doing that stuff versus like the singing and dancing and the bear costumes and the circle and square and colors. Just for me, I felt like I enjoyed that more. So so how would you feel like at the end of your day, when you would go hang out with your friends, what would you talk to them about as far as like what you did at school that day?
Well, it would depend on the lesson that we were doing at the time. But yeah, we would just talk about, really, when I would go and talk to my other English teachers from other institutes that we made friends with, I would honestly kind of brag, to be honest with you, just because we had, it was such a good system that we were working with at my institute that it was just fun. My days were great, and my nights were great as well, teaching and stuff like that. So. So yeah, we would just talk about the lesson and what we would do, and it's all interactive. So there's always an activity or something with the lesson, and that it's whether it's music or science or anything like that. There's always a lesson or a interactive activity, and so we would always talk about that, and we would bounce ideas off each other. That's the one thing. Like after you've taught a lesson a few times, and you would want to kind of change it up a little bit. So I would talk to my other teachers about, ideas on, fun activities. That's kind of what we talked about a lot, going out with, my friends and stuff.
Well, if you had to choose, like, if you were deciding to be a teacher again in China, what what would you pick? Would you choose to teach kids or adults, and why?
That's a good question. I think I had fun. I had a lot of fun doing both. I felt like teaching adults, I learned a lot about the Chinese culture and the Chinese, business, how they do business and things like that. But with the kids, it was just so much fun. When I go back to Guangzhou, I go visit my kids. I enjoy going seeing my adult students as well, but I look forward to seeing my kids just because they made such a big impact on my life. Just to see them grow and mature as like little people, little adults. So yeah, I think that's. I think I would go back and teach kids again, and I think I would go back with First Leap. To be honest with you, it's with these language institutes, you can also grow within. It's not just I'm solely a teacher or anything like that. If you want to move forward, you can. But yeah, I think I would go back and teach kids again, just because they really took my heart. I miss them.
I can tell. I can tell. I've heard you talk about your kids before too. Your kids you taught. I mean, for me personally, I loved everyone I taught. I would teach all of them again. The adults, business English, the teenagers. It was the right choice for me, and I loved every moment of it. And I would absolutely do it again. Okay, well, I kind of want to wrap it up there because I feel like we've really sort of talked about this topic a lot here. We've got a lot of great, I think, different perspectives and comparing and contrasting, and talking about like advice, for all of you if you're trying to decide who you should teach. If you still have questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. We'll be following up. We have had a few comments from people during the session. We'll get back to some of you if you do have any specific questions. If you're watching this recording later, you can also ask a question too, and we'll definitely be monitoring it and responding to people. So yeah, feel free to put them in there. Also, we are going to post some of our hot jobs in the comments below as well. We do have a lot of jobs that we're hiring for around China. Most of our hot jobs are for teaching kids, just because the market is so big and we have so many kids jobs available. So definitely check that out if you want to teach kids. If you're interested in teaching adults, you can always go to our website, careerchina.com, and you can go to the jobs section and you can search all the different schools. You'll even see the school that I used to teach for, Menton. We may have some jobs available for them, I believe. I remember seeing them on there. We also have some other adult schools as well. So there are some adult jobs, but by and large, there's a lot of children's jobs too. But yeah, feel free to check those out. And as always, let us know if you have any questions. Be sure to follow along and subscribe. Make sure that you're getting all this information. And we really look forward to chatting with all of you. If you ever, want to know about our experiences teaching in China, you have any questions, looking for advice, anything like that.
Yeah, so, same here. Don't hesitate to ask. I can chat all day about this. So if you have any questions about teaching adults to teaching kids, don't hesitate to ask. I'm here as well. So. All
right. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today, Josh. And you're also on the Career China team. We reminded people of that earlier. So between the two of us, we're going to be doing, try to be doing more of these like live sessions, Q&A kind of stuff in the future. So you might see me on it. You might see Josh. Yeah, and some other guests too. So we're looking forward to it. All right, so thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope you have a great Friday, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.